Hello and welcome to Murphy's Garden. A big momentous day today after 5 years of having these supports in, growing these hornbeam Pleached Avenue. It's now time to remove the supports. We have left them in perhaps a bit longer than some other people may have, but this is a particularly windy spot in our garden, particularly in the autumn and the winter. But I think we've got a good girth on here. They're not going to go anywhere. So we're going to take these out, and we do plan to do something with this area because it's very mishmash of different types of planting and doesn't really give good continuity. So I'm pruning the roses and Alice is taking out the supports, and then we're going to plan on what we're going to do underneath here. It will look a lot nicer with these gone, so he's going to crack on with that today.
This is the view up the Hornbeam Avenue with the trees with the supports still in. So we'll just take a before and then we'll do an after. So I suppose they are quite unsightly, but to be honest, we've just got used to them. So that's the first one out. Second one out. So we've taken 2 out now. Now, as I say, they have been in quite a long time, these supports, 8 years. I thought it was 5 years, but it's actually 8. And the reason why we've been so slow at removing them is that once the bamboo structure is attached, it's a bit like a big sail, and when they're all joined together it's even more like a sail, and the wind hurtles through our garden in the winter and autumn months, and it makes us rather nervous because you see the whole structure looks as if it's sort of bending in the wind. So we have been quite slow at removing them, but I think with the girth as they are now, I hope that they're not going to go anywhere.
Putting up a bit of a fight. You put those in well.
Yeah, I dug them in.
Oh my goodness, look how deep that is.
We can see that Al did a cracking job of supporting these trees while they were established, and they've survived all the wind and weather that's been thrown at them.
So the supports have been removed from the hornbeam, and wow, that just looks so much better. It looks really lovely. It's funny how we've just got used to them being there, but with them gone, it just looks lovely. And this little blue tit on the nuts. And now Alistair's going to just give this hornbeam a light winter prune. It's a good time to do it. We will do it again, obviously in the summer when it's got its leaves on it, but it's quite good just to go through it and just look at the structure while it's got no leaves on it. And I think Murph and I will go and get some lunch, shall we, Murph? Come on then, let's go.
So Al's identified that there's a little bit of a hump when you stand back, that the hornbeam isn't exactly straight at the very top. So he's just going to take out some of the, a little bit of the main stem just to lower a couple of the trees down a little bit. So that's what he's doing now. And then he's just going through the whole hornbeam hedge and just checking all the ties. So any ones that are getting a little bit tight, he'll be loosening those off. So it's quite a big job, but it's important to do this every year. Otherwise you'll find that you're restricting the growth, and we don't want that. And once the ties are loosened off, then next he's just going to give it a light trim this time of year, just to make sure it looks nice and neat and sharp going into the new season. So he's just doing that with a hedge cutter. And it's all a little bit noisy, so Murphy's got his ear defenders on. He's always one for health and safety, and he might just catch up with a gardening podcast or two just to pass the time. Oh, aren't you cutie? That's the first row all done, and it's really, really poker straight. From when we look at it out the window, you can see it's really, really straight and perfect looking, so I'm really pleased with that. Now the second row was put in 4 years later, so we put in 2019, it's been in for 4 years now, so it's less mature, and you can see that looking at the trunk, it's about half the girth of the ones of the trees opposite. And if you watch the video, you'll see that these were put in a slightly different way from the other ones, which were already pleached. These ones were bought as standard hornbeam trees. We planted the trees, spaced them out, and then stripped out the lower branches, and then added the framework, which we built ourselves, to these trees, and then pleached them onto that framework. And you can see, looking at the trunks of the trees, the knobbly bits along the trunk is where the branches were. But I think over time, as they swell up and as the trunks get thicker, these will become smoother. So I don't think that's too much of a problem. So now if we come on to the process of pleaching these trees. So if you look up into the canopy, you'll see that the branches, so when the branches are young, Alistair bends them back. They're pliable and they're whippy growth, so you're able to bend even front-facing branches. You can turn right round to form this structure. So you want them to face, left and right. So you bend them back on themselves, and he tied the branches in. But now, over a period of time, another year's gone by, and a lot of these branches will naturally just stay in this position now. So if you release the tie, they don't sort of ping back again. They're fixed now. So he's released those ties as they're starting to get quite tight, and they do swell up quite quickly. So it's really important every year to go along and just check them. And now what's happening here, you can see as this branch has got longer, he's now tied in the branch at the end. So the branches nearest the trunk are no longer needed, but the ones at the end now are. So they're starting to join together, and it's joining with its neighbour, which is over here. So these long branches are reaching out, and then they're being able to be pleached together. And you can see in this one is has got more leaves on it, but again there's fewer ties nearest the trunk of the tree, but the longer branches as they go out are still needed to be tied in. So that's the principle of doing these pleached hornbeam trees, and they're really filling out, and they're starting to look very similar to the ones opposite, and it won't be long before they are just the same as on this side. And the other thing that Alistair's done, and it is Alistair that does all this, I just talk about it, he actually does all the work. But he's checked all the supports of these trees, because as I said, we will leave these in for several more years to come, and they're all secure. But we did notice that the end post, which is holding up the bamboo structure, was getting buffeted around in the wind and had worked its way a bit loose. So he's made a new hole and reinserted that pole, and it's nice and secure, and will certainly hold it all up for certainly another year until we check it all again next year. And it's only doing this video that I realised just how much work it is for Alistair doing all this, and poor thing. But I absolutely love it. I'm really grateful for all the work he does. It looks incredible. And not only do I love it, but the birds love it. It brings so many birds into our garden too. I think it's quite interesting to review our hornbeam avenue compared to the lime avenues that we saw at Errdig Hall when Olivia and I visited 2 weeks ago. We did a video all about it if you haven't seen it. I love visiting other gardens, and I'm always on the lookout for new ideas and ways of doing things perhaps differently, and there's always something new to learn. Errdig has these 2 huge avenues of pleached lime trees. You can tell they're limes because limes have these sort of zigzag branches. Lime, or tilia, is a good and common choice of tree for use on pleaching. In our garden we have a row of lime trees which Al pleached just last year, and we did a comprehensive video all about different ways to get the pleached avenue look on varying budgets. It's interesting to see how they've done it at Errdig, and even though it's on a much bigger scale, we can still get ideas. So they've put in these large metal posts at each end, and then again every third tree. And between the posts run 6 lengths of wire to which the branches have been trained. We spoke to one of the gardeners, and he informed us that these trees were planted in the 1970s when the National Trust took over the ownership of Errdig, and so they've been here between 40 and 50 years. It is interesting to see that the girth of the trunks are not really that big for a tree of this age, but if we compare them to the lime trees on our drive, which were planted about 15 years ago but are not restricted, you can see that the process of pleaching is all about controlling and restricting the tree's growth and forcing the branches to grow in a very architectural and visibly pleasing way. After all this time, the branches no longer need to be tied onto the wire, but rather the trees have joined together and the structure is as one. The wires and posts are no longer needed, but they're just left in place. On a more practical level, for gardeners to achieve this look, we have used wooden posts, one at each end and one in the middle of our row of 10 hornbeam trees. We brought the trees in this row pre-pleached onto bamboo structures and joined them all together. And for the second row, we made our own bamboo structures, and the video shows exactly how to do this. The first hornbeam row, which has now been here for 8 years, is barely tied in now, just a few in places, and the branches are knitting together very well, and the entire structure is hopefully strong and rigid and as one. Therefore, we feel it's now safe to remove the individual tree supports. The bamboos are just left, and I guess eventually will just rot and break, but they will no longer be required. The second row, which has now been in for 4 years, we're still in the process of tying in and interlacing the young shoots along the supporting bamboo framework. As I said, the bamboo structure acts a bit like a sail in the wind, and we will leave the tree supports in for several more years. This is far longer than recommended when planting trees usually, but we need to avoid root rot, and our garden is incredibly windy, especially in this spot where the trees are planted and they are exposed to the prevailing westerly winds. It is interesting to see that the rows of limes at Errdig are growing in a different way and are similar to the method employed to espalier fruit trees, which they have growing in abundance at Errdig. The branches of the trees have been very accurately spaced into 6 tiered branches, and they are pruned back hard, removing all the new season's growth to stop them getting any bigger. They are only a branch thick, and so when the leaves fall, the trees provide this great architectural form in the winter months. This method looks amazing, but the downside is that the tiered branches do not provide quite as much privacy, which may or may not be a consideration. This method is also incredibly labour intensive, and each branch must be cut back by hand. It is interesting to note that, as we discussed when we did the rose pruning video, apical growth is always dominant, and this can clearly be seen here with the most vigorous growth quite obviously on the top tier. At Errdig, the job of hand pruning these trees involves 65,000 cuts and takes the gardeners 10 weeks to complete, but there are between 150 to 200 trees, and so perhaps on our 7 limes this may be more achievable. The method we have employed on our hornbeam, and which is more commonly used in domestic gardens, is to allow the branches to merge together in a more random way and bulk out to the desired width and density, and then trim it in the same way you would cut a normal hedge. The best bit is that once mature, this is quick to do and can be done with a hedge trimmer. Hornbeam or beech have smaller leaves and branches than lime, and so I think they suit this approach better, whereas the branches of lime trees become quite gnarly over time, and so I think the formal tiered look really show this off to good effect, and the bigger heart-shaped leaves can be appreciated when not tangled together. Although both hornbeam and limes are both deciduous trees, you will notice that the pleached hornbeam, like beech, holds on to some of its brown leaves in the winter months. Have you ever wondered why it is that beech or hornbeam trees are bare in winter and yet a beech or hornbeam hedge remains covered in brown dead leaves? The reason is that most deciduous trees jettison or lose their leaves in autumn as chlorophyll levels change and the leaves turn from green to yellow. But a physiological condition referred to as juvenility means that young trees, or trees kept small by pruning, typically below 2 metres in height, retain their withered dead leaves to prevent predation from deer and rabbits, which hate the texture of old dry leaves, and so the emerging young juicy buds beneath are protected from being eaten. As there are no passing giraffes here in the UK, trees above 2 metres have no predators, and so bigger trees have no need for this protection, and so leaves are jettisoned as normal. Beech and hornbeam hedges retain their leaves because by cutting them they are kept in a juvenile state, and I guess pleached trees of beech and hornbeam are a bit like teenagers, neither juvenile nor fully mature, and so they seem to retain a few of their leaves. Having shown Alistair the footage of the lime trees at Errdig, he's now got ambitions of doing ours in the same way. These are the limes you see behind us, and we did them in a sort of random format, a bit like the hornbeam, but now he's seen the way they do it with the very sort of definitive rows. He's thinking that he might have a go at doing it with these trees, because privacy for us here isn't a problem. We're not overlooked in this part of the garden, so I don't know, I like them as they are really, but it's up to him if he wants to have a go. So I think we've reached the end of the video on pleaching, and we've certainly learned a lot along the way. So certainly from having these hornbeam trees in our garden and growing these lime trees from when they were little tiny little saplings, and watching the trees grow and develop over the years, I think we've learned quite a lot. And also even visiting Errdig a couple of weeks ago was quite insightful, looking at different ways and techniques of doing things. So it's quite
quite a contentious issue. Lots of people have had lots of comments about on YouTube about different ways of doing it and asking lots of really relevant and pertinent questions, and I thought it might be quite good to share some of these with you and do a Q&A with some of the questions that I've already had. And certainly if you've got any other questions that you might have, I know there's quite a few of you that have watched the video and are having a go at doing it yourself. So interesting to hear your views and opinions and experiences, and we can just share this in a Q&A in the next video. So if you have got any questions, just send them over to me either on Instagram or on the comment section on YouTube. And I will answer some of the questions that I've already been asked, because as I say, some of them are quite good questions that maybe I haven't thought of before. So I'll answer those questions and any other ones you may have on the next video. Thanks very much for watching, and join us again then.